Thank you for watching, listening, whatever you're doing today. Thank you. We're finishing our series on Seeing is Believing. It's been kind of a fun series. It makes you kind of think about some things. But I want to finish with this idea at the end that is called vision correction, correcting your vision. I remember when I was growing up, I went to the eye doctor for the first time. And they tested, they do that whole thing. Do you see clearly 1 or 2? And they do all that stuff, and you have to see the little lines, the letters that you read, and what's the lowest one you can, all that stuff. And so I remember one of the first couple times I did that. I've never done it before and done any of that vision correction stuff. And it was interesting because he did this one where he flipped the little things, that were on your eyes, and he put this picture in front of me, and it was a picture of a fly, and it was supposed to be, when he did the little flipping things, it was supposed to be like 3D, but he's like, do you see like a 3D? Do you see a fly that's big? So it's like supposed to scare you or something, I don't know. But I was like, no, I don't see a fly that's like 3D, height, depth, whatever. I just see a flat fly and it looks a little weird. It looks like it's kind of off center. And he's like, really? Are you sure? And I was like, yeah, this is, and I went and touched it. And then he's like, oh, okay. And what he figured out is I have a slight stigmatism, which means that some of my eye is shaped a little bit wonky. So sometimes I have struggles with depth perception. And that's true. I'll look at something, I'm like, I can't tell if that's far, close, depth perception, and I know that's that stigmatism stuff. And so I think from time to time, we need to have our vision corrected, right? And here's the example I would like to encourage you to think about, consider, and it's in Matthew 7, verses 1 to 5. And this is the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus is talking to the general public. It's a big, giant group of people that are on a hillside. Jesus is speaking to probably thousands of people. And he says, in the midst of, it's basically Matthew 5 through 7. It's a long, nice, fantastic Sermon on the Mount. But in the middle of it, he says this. He says, do not judge so that you will not be judged. For in the way that you judge, you will be judged. And the standard of measure, it will be measured to you. So what he's saying here is, if you judge a little bit, you're going to be judged a little bit. But if you use a gallon-sized judgment a lot, you're going to be judged a whole boatload, a lot as well. The measure of judgment that you use is the measure of judgment that will be used on you. And you're like, what does that have to do with vision? Well, this is what it has to do with vision. In verse 3, Jesus says this. And it's all related, it all goes together. He says, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but you don't notice the log that is in your eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and you're not even aware of the log in your own eye? And then he says, you hypocrite, first take the log out of your eye, and then you can see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eyes. I think this is really interesting for us to think about, because what Jesus is telling us here is this vision correction has to do with judging. It has to do with judging people. And when we judge people, Jesus is saying your vision is inaccurate, because you can't even look through your own eyes with clarity. You see somebody else's faults, shortfalls, deficiencies, but you're clueless about your own garbage. And before you start changing, trying, and pointing out all of everybody else's stuff, think about yourself first. Look into your own soul, into your heart, and consider what's inside there. Because you can't see clearly other people's stuff until you first deal with the stuff in your own soul and your own heart. And so I think it's important for us to consider. Because I do think from time to time, as followers of Jesus, we can fall into that judgment trap where we are, quote unquote, judgmental. And that's kind of common today. Well, I'm not no judging. But, blah, 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 blah. And I do think that we tend to judge, even though we say we're not judging. And we're like, and then sometimes we'll religiousise our judging. Well, I'm just praying for them. And in reality, we're saying they're yucky, they're awful, they're horrible, they have bad, blah, 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 blah. And you're like, well, how do you balance that stuff? Some of that might be actually true. Yeah, but maybe the first thing God would have us do first is look in our own souls. Before I start pointing out everybody else's stuff, I can look in my own soul and be like, whew, man, that was bad. You said this, and you not only said it, but this is what you meant in your heart. And think about that, Sarah. That was unkind. That was impatient. That was ugly. That was inconsistent. That was not grounded in truth. That was deception. That was you being cranky, you being judgmental. And if we don't let Holy Spirit work in our souls and correct our vision, then all we're doing is pointing out specks, splinters, and blemishes, and little tiny things. And we're missing the stuff that's big in our own souls and our own hearts. And so before we start trying to pull everybody else's speck out of their eye, before we take the splinter out of their eye, we have to give Holy Spirit permission to work on the beam, the giant thing protruding that's in us, to correct our vision. And before I start taking shots at people around me, whether it's fellow believers or people that I work with, people I go to school with, maybe it's better to ask Holy Spirit, speak into my own soul, into my own heart, into my own, what's inside me. Because when I give Holy Spirit permission to work on that stuff, then the judgment quantity decreases. And Jesus says it, the measure that I judge others is how much the quantity I will be judged. So I think it's important. If we find ourselves being judged a lot, then maybe that's something to ask. Have I been judgmental? Because that is a reflection. And that's what Jesus tells us in these first couple of verses in Matthew chapter 7. So it's vision correction, and it's an awareness. It's like, ooh, wow, that's kind of an epiphany. That's a light bulb that goes off letting me know, I need some adjustment, some vision correction. So thank you for subscribing. Make sure you hit the notification bell right there. That'll be really helpful to keep you posted on new content. And here is a question for you. This is a question as it relates to what's coming up. So Easter is just around the corner. And my question for you is, what do you do to celebrate Easter? That's an easy one, right? And it's not like scary. What do you do to celebrate Easter? And of course, we have our fantastic joke here at the end. And this one's medium. Even by my standards, it's medium. Apple is designing a new automatic car, but they're having trouble installing Windows. I know, you're like, that's pretty lame. I agree, but of course next week will be much better. Thank you.